Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Society. My name is Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, and I am one of the ministers here. Today, I am joined by the worship team of Drew Collins, Linda Warren, Stephen Gregorius, and Daniel Carnes, and by the talented singers of our Meeting House Choir. The flowers this morning are in memory of Michael May, longtime and beloved member of this congregation whose memorial service was held here yesterday. The vision of FUS is growing souls, connecting with one another, and embodying our UU values in our lives, our community, and our world. If you are visiting us today, welcome. We are so very glad that you are with us. If you would like more information about First Unitarian Society, please stop by the welcome table that is just out those doors and to the left in the Commons. We hope that you will stay and join us for coffee hour immediately following the service, also out there in the Commons. For those connecting with us virtually today, we are glad that you are with us as well. And we hope that you will be able to take a moment and watch the announcement slides after today's service to learn about upcoming programs and activities. And now I invite you to join me in a moment of silence to center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time as we join together once again in community. Blessed is the ground on which we stand. Holy is this place. Holy are the places of memory, the places which have formed us, where we store the icons of success and shattered dreams and gather threads and pieces of what we would become. Holy are the places of memory. Holy are the places of the dream, the places over the rainbow where all children are wanted and all people are fed, where colors are the source of celebration and youth and age come to the table as one. Holy are the places of the dream. Holy are the places of change and pain, the places of our struggle where the rivers of our lives run white and fast, and we hold on, and grow. Holy are the places of change and pain. Holy are the places of connection, the places where we risk ourselves, where hands, touch souls, touch minds, and in awareness still we change our lives. Holy are the places of connection. Holy are the places of becoming, the places of clear vision where life and world are intertwined and we can see forever in this moment and give thanks. Holy are the places of becoming. Now I invite you to rise in body and or spirit and join me in the words for the kindling of our chalice flame. We light this chalice in honor of first steps, for beginning even when the path ahead is unclear, for the courage it takes to trust that the way will reveal itself, that light will come to clarify our vision, that friends will be by our side. May the words, song, stillness, and common breath of this hour remind us that every step of the way is never one we take alone.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Friends, I want to invite forward now anyone who would like to come hear a story this morning. Hello. Hi there. Thanks for coming up and joining me here. It's so nice to see you. Hi. I have a story for you this morning. It is called The 12 Dancing Princesses. What do you think is going to be in this story?
12 dancing princesses.
You got it. There are 12 of them, and, well, we're going to find out about the dancing part. So, once upon a time, there lived a king in a certain kingdom who had 12 daughters, which meant that all 12 of his daughters were princesses. Now, I don't want you to get the impression that we should take this king as a good example of almost anything. Certainly not excellent parenting techniques, because this king did not let his daughters do basically anything. He made them live in the castle all the time. They weren't allowed to leave. He didn't let them have any fun, and they all had to share the same room. I mean, I shared a room growing up, but I didn't share it with 11 other people.
I would love that.
Well, maybe we can have a diversity of opinions then. Some people are excited. Okay, all right. Well, so here's the situation. They couldn't leave the castle. They all slept in the same room. And one day, the king noticed this certain thing that was happening, which was that in the morning, when the castle woke up and the princesses went about their days, the brand new shoes, they'd been brand new just the day before. He had given all of his daughters new shoes. And all the shoes that had been brand new the day before were totally worn out. You know, they had the soles were worn down all the way to the bottom, almost as if they'd been dancing in those shoes all night long. So the king asked his daughters, the princesses, "Hey, what's up with these shoes? What are you doing? It's wearing these shoes out so fast." And what do you think they said?
Dancing.
You think they said dancing? Okay, what else do you think?
They didn't do it.
That they didn't do anything. They were like, I don't know. I have no explanation.
And they said that they didn't do anything at all.
That they didn't do anything at all. Yes. So they had no explanation. Who knows how that happened? Just the shoes got worn out.
I know.
Can we please have some more shoes? Yes.
They were dancing.
Well, let's find out about that. So the king wanted to solve this mystery, right? He wanted to find out what caused the wearing out of his daughter's shoes. So, of course, the first thing that he thought of in terms of how he was going to solve this mystery for himself was to get somebody else to solve it for him. So he wanted to find someone who would figure out what's up with the shoes. What are his daughters doing all night long? So he offered a reward. He said, whoever can solve this mystery for me will get to be the next king of the kingdom. They'll become my heir. They'll take over for me after I die. And they can marry whichever of my daughters they want. Again, I can't stress enough, this is not a good model for parenting or good government.
What if it's not a boy?
That he did not specify, just they get to take over for me after I die. So, but here's the thing. He didn't just say you can have this prize. He also wanted to create a sense of urgency, and make people feel like they had a limited window. So he said, if you're going to try and solve the mystery, you get 3 days to do it in, and at the end of those 3 days, if you can't tell me what's going on with my daughters and these shoes, I'm going to cut your head off. Right? Not a good king. I can't stress this enough. This guy's not doing his job well. So he would cut off their heads. So some people tried, and it didn't work out very well for some of the people who tried. You can imagine. But eventually, there was one person who came to try and solve the mystery. And basically, he got very lucky because on his way to the castle, in order to solve the mystery, he happened to run into a witch. And the witch is really the person who solved this whole thing, because this guy didn't have any really impressive qualities other than he met this witch on the way to the castle. But the witch said, you're going to need this magic cloak that'll turn you invisible. That'll help you solve the mystery. And she was right about that, as we will see. So This young man with the magical cloak that turns him invisible says, I'm going to solve this mystery. And so first, he gets a nice room in the castle, and he pretends to be asleep. Well, the princesses are listening, because he knows the princesses are listening at his door, so he's pretending to be asleep, like, hush, hush, hush. So they'll think that everything's cool, and they're not going to get caught. And then he puts on the cloak, so that he can be invisible, and he goes and peeks inside the princess's room, which already is messed up. It's not nice to peek into other people's rooms when they're trying to sleep. But he peeks into their room, and what does he see? He sees the princesses going into their closet, and there's a secret passage at the back of the closet that leads to a bunch of steps all the way down deep underground, where there's this giant cave. It's a huge cave. It's so big it has a whole lake in the middle of it. And they take boats across the lake, and on an island in the lake, there's another palace. There's a whole other palace underneath the palace that they live in. And what do all night long in that palace? They dance. They dance, and that's why their shoes are getting so worn out. And he sees the whole thing, and they don't even notice because he's invisible. And so in the morning, he gets to tell the king everything that happened. He totally rats them out, and so he wins the prize. That's the end of the original version of the story, right? He gets the prize, he gets to be the next king, he gets to marry one of the princesses. Okay, but wait a second here. I have a real question for you. What's so bad about dancing? Why do the princesses need to get in trouble for dancing? Why is it dancing so bad that they had to hide it from their father? They have to do this whole creative escapade with the underground castle? Yes.
Because he won't let them go outside.
Right, he won't let them go outside to have any fun.
Any fun events.
Yeah. So they had to go through this whole rigmarole. Yes.
It's because he's really well being to his daughters. Or he does them so they have to hide it from him
Yeah.
in order to not get in trouble.
Yeah, the conclusion here to me is that the people who won't let you dance are pretty mean in general. Yes. What do you think? Well, that's true, I suppose, but if you think about the fact that now one of them has to marry this rando, I feel like that's a punishment. What do you think?
So, why they would go into the underground castle is because the king said they couldn't have fun.
Yeah, the king said they couldn't have fun. Yes, what do you think?
So, I know why they like that place so much.
Uh-huh.
Guess what it is? It's literally outside, like outside.
Right, it's like the cave situation is like being outside. You're right, absolutely.
Go outside when
Yeah. It's almost like being able to go outside is an important thing for living things, you know? Yes.
I bet the king thought that he was doing the right thing, but he thought he was doing what's good for his daughters.
Yeah, okay, so in this theory, the king is trying to do something that he thinks is good for his children, even though it's obviously not. Yes.
Well, she's trying to find someone to solve the mystery, but he felt that step, and that's how, and he actually was solving the mystery by himself without finding someone to solve the mystery.
Yes, he was trying to get someone to help him by solving the mystery. So, let's come up with a new ending for this story, okay? Because I'm not happy with the original ending, where the guy with the magical cloak gets to be the next king, and one of these princesses has to marry him for no good reason. So, what if we said that the princesses just said, look, Dad, we like to dance. And if you don't like that, we're sorry, but we're going to keep dancing. So, you can do whatever you want with the kingdom, that's not really our problem, but
Is the king.
the king is the king, that's true, but the princesses are princesses. Fair enough. In conclusion, it's mean to stop people from dancing. Thank you for listening to my story. Have a good time at class.
And the moral is to never dance.
No.
Oh, you can make the world so bright, and you can turn the day from night, and share your gifts and spread your light.
I invite you now into this time of giving and receiving, where we give freely and generously to this offering which sustains and strengthens our community here, and also our outreach offering recipient, who this week is Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, a community of Black UUs who are committed to expanding the power and capacity of Black Unitarian Universalists by providing support, information, and opportunities for justice-making and liberation through our faith. There are multiple ways to share your gifts this morning. There are baskets at the exit to this room in which you may place cash or checks, or you can see on the screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org, as well as finding the text to give information there. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
Today's offertory is a spiritual that has several titles, which is not uncommon for folk songs. We're singing a version titled, "God's Going to Set This World on Fire." It also goes by, I'm gonna climb up Jacob's ladder and River of Jordan. And perhaps most familiar to Unitarian Universalists, it appears in our hymnal as under the title, "The Welcome Table," or "I'm Going to Sit at the Welcome Table." There are many different verses, and the arrangers chose these 5 that we're going to sing for you. And just a few notes about them. One of the verses was sung, we believe, as collected in an 1874 anthology of spirituals. That at least one of the verses was sung by a child extemporaneously as he was separated from his mother, being sold separately from her to another plantation. There's also reference to the biblical chapter of Revelation in the Christian Bible, in which those of the Christian faith are rejoined with Jesus in heaven at the welcome table. And since African Americans bound in slavery were never welcome at their master's table, this song echoed their hope of the tables turning in future glory. A sentiment that is echoed by someone speaking of a song that we'll sing later on, the South African freedom song. And he said, "When we sing this song, it is from the bottom of our hearts. We have hope for some things that we are sure to receive, but we do not know when." In the 1960s, the song we're about to sing was modified, as many spirituals were, for use in the civil rights movement.
Thirsty. I'm gonna drink and never get thirsty. thirsty one of these days, hallelujah. I'm gonna drink and never get thirsty. I'm gonna drink and never get thirsty one of these days. God's gonna set this world on fire. Yes, yes, God's gonna set this world on fire one of these days, hallelujah. God's gonna set this world on fire. God's gonna set this world on fire. One of these days.
Thank you so much. It is said in the Gospel according to Matthew that once the teacher Jesus told some of his students this story, that there was a vineyard and a man who owned it, and he needed some folks to work there for him to get done the business of the vineyard. So he went out into the market one morning, and he said to some folks there, "Work for me from now until the evening, and I will pay you 1 coin." Well, there was a lot of work and only so many hands to do it. And around about noon, the vineyard owner recognized that he needed more workers. So he went back out into the marketplace, and he said to some more people there, "Work for me from now until the evening, and I will pay you what is right." The day wore on, the work still needed doing, and there were still people who needed to do it. And so the vineyard owner went out one more time into the marketplace, and he found some more people. It was just 1 hour before nightfall now, but he said to them, "Work for me from now until the evening, and I will pay you what is right." Well, the day ended as all days do, and it was time for him to pay the wages owed to the workers. And to those workers who had been working for just 1 hour, he paid 1 coin. And he went to the workers who had been there since noon, about half a day. He found them, and he went to each of them, and he paid them 1 coin. And then he went to the workers who had been there from the very beginning, the people that he had started with, and he paid them 1 coin. Now, just like the people who listen to this story, and it's telling in the Gospel of Matthew, we might expect that the people who had been working there longer, who had put in more time, would be paid more, and the people who had been working there shorter, who had put in less time, would be paid less. In just the same way that we might expect that if we showed up here and we sat in the front, we'd be closer to the preacher. We showed up here and we sat in the back, we'd be further away. But one of the great things about religion is its potential to surprise us, to remind us that the world is not always as we expect it to be, and that this is a good thing. Because if the world can surprise you, then with enough creativity and compassion and collective will, you can surprise the world and perhaps help to change things from the way that they are to the way that they ought to be. Some years ago, there was this video that was making the rounds on the internet. You might have seen it. It was a short piece narrated by an internet entrepreneur named Derek Sivers. Honestly, his message about movement building is not really what caught me about the piece itself. It was what the video was more than his commentary that spoke to me. In the image of the actual video, it's of a scene of an outdoor concert. A host of people sprawling lazily on a grassy hillside, staring passively at the stage. But in the center of the video's frame is one young man who is not just lying around like the rest of the folks. He is shirtless and shoeless. His pasty white skin glistens in the summer sun as he dances all alone to the music. And friends, it must be said, this is not particularly good dancing. It is erratic and disorganized, almost frantic, and terribly, terribly awkward. He dances alone for what seems like an eternity. He was dancing before the video began. Has he always been dancing? Will he ever stop? And then a new person joins in. Their movement together is no less awkward or strange. Watching, I found myself growing sympathetically uncomfortable. And yet, more people join them. After the seemingly endless period of the lone dancer by himself, the whole screen fills up with a huge crowd of staggering, flailing, undulating people in barely 1 minute's time. From a single pebble, and then another, an entire landslide is begun. There is something in the power of dance to get people active, engaged, and moving together, which lends itself to social change and to upheaval. Or at least, tightly controlled nations and societies seem to think that that connection exists. One of the leading accusations at the Salem witch trials was that of having been seen in the woods late at night dancing. In Germany during World War II, listening and dancing to jazz music was a popular mode of teenage rebellion, popular enough to get people sent to prison and executed for it. The decades of communist rule in Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania all saw a crackdown on folk dancing clubs for fear that the radical influences of polka and line dancing would destabilize the state. Among its more minor crimes, albeit one of its least popular, the Taliban regime in Afghanistan specifically banned dancing at weddings. And 70 or so years ago, it was common in this country for municipalities to attempt to legislate or control what sorts of music or dance moves would be permitted in public assemblies. The criminalization of dance is a universal sign of a system of power so paranoid about its own survival that it must control the bodies of its citizens. Emma Goldman is sometimes quoted as having said, "If I can't dance, it's not my revolution." She didn't actually say this. What she said came after a fellow activist criticized her wild and reckless energy on the dance floor as being harmful to the liberatory political cause that they were both devoted to. "I did not believe," she said, "that a cause which stood for release and freedom from convention and prejudice should demand the denial of life and joy. If it meant that, I did not want it. I want freedom, the right of self-expression, everybody's right to be beautiful, radiant things." In the Hebrew Bible, the Exodus from Egypt ends with a great dance party as the children of Israel celebrate their escape from bondage on the far shore of the sea. Several of the Psalms, which, remember, were essentially written as a hymn book, call upon the congregation to dance in the worship of God. And it is said in the second book of Samuel that David, the ancient king of Israel, danced before the Lord. The Baal Shem Tov, the 18th century Jewish mystic credited with founding the Hasidic movement, is said to have told a parable in order to explain his and his followers' well-known tendency towards exuberance and spontaneous bursting into song and dance. Once, a fiddler came to a village and began to play. And though he was a stranger there, his music was so beautiful that people could not help but stop and listen. First one, and then two, and then a crowd began to gather, and then the people started to dance. There was so much rejoicing and such a feeling of commonality between the dancing people. But just then, a deaf person, someone who could not hear the music, passed by. To him, the scene was very strange, and he wondered, has the world gone mad? The Baal Shem Tov explained that he and his people heard music in every sacred fragment and facet of the world. If others could not hear the tune, then why should they cease to dance? Sometimes we perceive what no one else seems to, and if we find joy in that unique perception, surely we ought not to hide from that joy, simply for the fear of appearing out of place. But if we take this story seriously enough to examine it critically for a moment, we find a major flaw. The quality of being deaf is not a deficiency. It is simply another way of being in the world. And there is no reason why a deaf person should be ignorant of what dancing is or incapable of joining in themselves if they want to, by watching the movements and picking them up indirectly, or by feeling the percussive rhythm with their whole bodies rather than relying on their ears. And if everyone is dancing in their own unique way, united by the activity, but not by any specific set of moves, then what's the actual barrier to participation if you don't happen to hear the music? No, a deaf person should not be the negative example in this story. A better choice might be someone who could hear the music, but decided to pretend that they cannot, because they believe there is something wrong or shameful about dancing. One of the most recognizable images of Shiva, the Hindu deity of creative destruction, pictures him in the pose of Nataraja, the dancer whose dancing destroys all illusions and allows everything in the universe to move. It is an ancient image, an artistic motif repeated throughout the Indian subcontinent. And it is also, strangely enough, the direct inspiration for a Christian hymn that became popular in hipper, folkier church services in the 1970s. That hymn, The Lord of the Dance, imagines Jesus as a dance caller, teaching new steps to the world. Its author, Sidney Carter, credits the image of Shiva in Nataraja for the inspiration for the hymn, and he assumed that that song would seem too heretical and too dubiously Christian to gain broad acceptance with actual churches. But even if Sidney Carter didn't realize it, he was, in fact, hearkening back to a scene in one of the Christian Bible's apocryphal texts, the books about Jesus and the early Christian movement that were left out of the biblical canon for including or hinting at unpopular ideas. In one such text, the Acts of John, just before his arrest and murder, Jesus arranges the disciples in a ring around him, holding hands. He engages them in a call and response, saying, among many other things, "Who danceth not, knoweth not what cometh to pass." Though the text is ambiguous, it seems to be describing a scene in which Jesus teaches a specific dance to his students as a final gift before his death. Dance is, of course, almost impossible to record in words. This problem bedeviled the world of ballet up until the advent of modern recording equipment. Before then, the complex choreography of a production was often stored only in the memory of people who trained with its original creator. Students might hoard such riches, refusing to teach them so that their special knowledge would be in demand, or they might instead seek to train as many new people as they could in the dance that their master conceived, so that the unique pattern of movements would not die with them and be lost. I confess to you, I am not much of a dancer. I sway, I bob my head, but I lack the discipline to appear graceful. Nevertheless, my heart is frequently moved by music, and I try always to be ready to make a fool of myself when the situation calls for it. This coming week marks a holiday on which many of us will gather to share the company of family. Families of origin, or of upbringing, or of choice. And although families can often be complicated and sometimes are much worse than complicated, it is a precious time of warmth and connection for many people. And it is also inescapably connected to the theft of land, the taking of lives, the betrayal of trust, and the destruction of culture that is the accurate story of the colonization of this continent from 500 years ago until today. What some call Thanksgiving and others call Thanksgrieving is a microcosm of a question we must face if we look honestly upon the world. With so much, so wrong, for so many, for so long, how can we possibly dance? If we take the pathway of willful obliviousness, ignoring the sorrow, the grief, the wrong, because it is inconvenient and distracts from our revelry, we will have inverted that story from the Baal Shem Tov. We will be the ones choosing to pretend not to perceive what we cannot help but perceive, dancing blithely in atrocity's shadow. Instead, we could sit in ashes only and forever, but that would not make any wrong thing right either, and it would offer no nourishment for the work that must be done. The third choice, the necessary one, in my estimation, is to grieve and to cry for the woes of the world and to dance on, too. This week, at your tables, wherever they may be, I hope that you will share good food and good company and celebrate in the dance of life. I hope that you will also make space around that table at that time to remember what injustices our world is built upon, and particularly those done and still being done to the native peoples of this prairie on which we reside and the whole continent on which it is nestled. Share grief and give thanks, both. The world is broken, and it needs your work to repair it, to challenge and confront all that stands in the way of everybody's right to be beautiful, radiant things. We cannot do that work if we refuse to see the wrong, and we cannot sustain that work if we deny ourselves the opportunity for joy. A life lived in pursuit of meaning, that is, a religious life, is about acting out and embodying things that are larger than words. We can make grand statements and sing stirring hymns, but it is the behavior of our bodies that is truly at issue. To struggle for liberation against the crush of oppression, to practice loving peace in the presence of violence and death. These are the only ways to cause the values we profess to live in us. And while it might be possible to do this on our own, like a lone dancer flailing awkwardly in an empty field, I don't recommend it. Dance, like liberation and redemption, can be attempted individually, but it can only ever truly be effective when we practice it collectively. The courage to be seen as a weirdo, a heretic, or a danger to the status quo on our own is important, but even more important is the shared courage to be seen as any or all of those things together.
It's me again. Your music director, weirdo, amen, heretic. The musical response to today's reflection is incomplete. We're going to sing a song called Bambalela, which is a Xhosa word in South Africa for never give up. It is sung frequently and in many contexts, including in worship services, but also in protest and homes. This arrangement comes from the Zwane Memorial Congregation in Gugulethu, Cape Town, where it was sung, among other times, in the encouragement of a woman whose son was living with and dying from AIDS. Is that me feeding back? All right. When I say it was incomplete, it will be incomplete. It's because I've specifically asked the choir to not dance. No, not because they're not good at it. Is that what that laugh meant? They really want to. It's just, there's a problem, and that is that in South Africa, freedom songs during the time of apartheid were part singing and part dancing, except that the words that were being sung and the dance moves did not mean the same thing. Like hula, the dance moves had a specific meaning. And for example, in the song that is often sung at football matches, Chocholosa, one of the first movements is this, which we might do in other dance styles as well. Just, it's a fairly common dance move, but in that context it meant we will dig the graves of our white masters. So, to avoid any unintentional communications that might undercut our message, we're going to stand not still. We can bob and sway, right? And make eye contact with each other and you, but we're not going to do any big dance moves. We're going to sing Bambalela in Xhosa and in English, which is the local custom to sing it in both.
Bambalela, 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 Bambalela,
invite you now to quiet your mind a bit. Turn with me both inward and outward. Join me in an attitude of meditation and of prayer. As the autumn enfolds our world in its russet blanket of leaves and an ivory dusting of snow, let us turn our hearts towards those who need our care. Let us remember the sorrows as well as the joys of this day. We think of those who are alone and lonely, those who are sick, those who are hungry, those who are not free. Let us make room in the solemn sanctuaries of our hearts for their cares, their needs, and their yearning of their souls to sit together alongside our own. We think of those in our midst and throughout the world this day who are grieving for lives that have been lost. Struck particularly deeply and suddenly this morning by the news of the violent and deadly attack on a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs last night. Also, to be mindful that tomorrow marks the Transgender Day of Remembrance, the day to memorialize those people who have been victims of violence and hate because someone did not like that they called themselves women or men or neither or both. Let's remember especially all people whose bodies and selves do not fit into the narrow expectations of the world around them and who live with us on a planet where the threat of violence and the weight of oppression for being who they truly are remains all too terribly real. Finally, let us open our hearts just a little wider to make space for those we have not remembered to let in, for the forgotten and the ignored, for the stranger and the lost. May the celebration and thanksgiving of this season remind us that each of us is connected to every other being on this earth, and so we should be aware of and attentive to the quality and the health of those connections. For ourselves and all the world, and for anyone who is listening, we pray. Blessed be, and amen.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding love that we love. There is a love holding us. Rest in this love. Now I invite you to rise in body and or in spirit to sing out of the gray hymnal, number 347, Gather the Spirit, Harvest the Power. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace.
at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Blessed be. Go in peace. And please be seated for the postlude.